Are learning some new details about the man who opened fire on former President Trump over the weekend at his rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. The spokesperson for the Secret Service telling Fox News that the shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks, was perceived by the Secret Service as a person of interest when law enforcement saw him acting suspiciously and determined he had a golf rangefinder. He says Crooks was only identified as a threat when he retrieved the weapon and climbed onto the roof, and that a threat requires a, quote, different protocol and a different course of action. Do want to talk more about all of this, so let's bring in Brian Boyd. He has more than 30 years experience as a professional intelligence analyst, counterterrorism specialist, and law enforcement professional. He's also a former Green Beret and was part of the leadership of the Joint Special Operations Command, which oversees the Special Forces, SEAL Team 6, and the Delta Force. So a big resume right there. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'll give you my best help.
Of course. All right. Well, I do want to talk a little bit about the comments here from the Secret Service, as they say that first, Crooks was a person of interest and then considered to be a threat right before all of this happened. So can you break down the difference there between person of interest and threat?
A person of interest and a threat is sort of parsing a suspicious person in normal layman terms. It does require different protocols, but I think even a basic cop was taught or has been taught that if somebody has some sort of reasonable suspicion, as opposed to being able to arrest it, it's not a problem to stop and ask questions and seek information or to go up to them, because this whole security thing at that perimeter, there was stronger security of going through with purses and backpacks and stuff like that at the entrances. And this guy is already in the area, and they had more than enough suspicion, more than enough reasonable reasoning to stop and ask him questions or go up to him and say, hey, let me have some identification. Who are you and why you're here? That wasn't done. And I find that to be the basic breakdown there.
And I do want to pull up just some of the video we have. We've been showing this time and time again because it shows the aftermath of the situation as Trump is raising up his fist, and he does have blood coming down the side of his face, and it kind of captures everything that did happen. So my question, and you kind of touched on this, and it's definitely not a simple question, but how does something like this happen where there's all of this law enforcement there, but a former president is nearly killed?
I hate to pass dispersion on the Secret Service because the agents on the scene did the right thing. Although they took forever to get him off the stage, which to me is a breakdown of a way to trade a situation like that. And having a short agent trying to protect a man, his entire torso and upper body is exposed. If that had been a professional hit, they would have had a second and third chance. So I saw lots and lots of failures. In my strict opinion, this was an absolute security failure. Even a security guard understands the basics of protecting a building or a principal or somebody coming on the area. So it's a basic breakdown. If you think of this as a layman and you're there hours before the president arrives and you stand on the stage and you look around the area, a normal layman would say, I should have somebody on that roof and that roof and that roof. And before he comes on stage, the agent in charge should be previewing the area. And even if it's a minor threat or a suspicious person, it's prudent to hold off letting him go on stage. You never, ever, when I was in the Green Berets, I was a jump master. And I never let the guys go unless I had the green light. And even if it was a green light, if it didn't look like the drop zone was clear, I'd tell the pilot to come back around because it has to be absolutely perfect so that you don't get people injured or killed. And nobody should have allowed him on the stage, even if there was a minor comment or a minor suspicion. The protocol thing is to say, hold off until absolutely everything's clear. And the agent on the scene should have seen there's nobody on that rooftop. Why would you let him go out on stage knowing your snipers are prepared? Maybe the snipers could see it, but wasn't there supposed to be somebody on that stage? So we need to see the operations plan that was initially passed before it went on stage. That operations plan should have had a note in there saying they're supposed to be on that rooftop. And that's a hole in their security. This is a top-down failure from the director on down. This is absolute incompetence on the way security is handled.
And moments ago, we actually learned from Fox News that Matthew Crooks, the reported gunman that you see right there on your screen, reportedly hid the weapon, the rifle that was used in advance at the rally. But by the time agents had spotted him on the roof, he already had it. So I guess my question for you is, would that make any sort of difference as far as how folks should have responded there if they didn't necessarily know that he had the rifle and it had been stored ahead of time? Does that change anything at all?
Again, it's all about sweeping the area. Over the years that I spent in the law enforcement industry and in the Green Berets intelligence work, it's normal to constantly sweep and constantly sweep. You check, you recheck. You check, you recheck. When you're parachuting, you check, you recheck. Because it's too late once the chute is open, and it's too late if you haven't swept the area thoroughly. Pointing fingers at the state and local police is absolutely wrong. Ultimately and absolutely, the agent in charge of that scene and the director of Secret Service, the buck has to fall on their desk. Blaming the locals for it is failure. They should have swept it and been absolutely extra thorough. I think they became complacent and assumed, like all the other Trump rallies, it's always been a peaceful love fest. And I just believe that's what they did wrong.
The head of the Secret Service obviously coming under fire here for that response, and she's expected to testify Monday before Congress. What do we expect to hear from her? Do we have any idea?
No, and having been inside the government over the years working for defense, justice, and treasury, I've been interviewed by the Washington Post in my office many times. So I always promise them to be open and transparent and clear because I need the help of the press. I don't need the press to be my enemy. And the press actually gets more information than all the spies in the world because we get more of our intelligence from open sources historically. So I believe what she should open up is say that I'm responsible. We made some mistakes. I promise this administration and I promise this committee a thorough and open and thorough investigation of what went wrong. And that should be the way she should open her statements. I'm surprised and appalled because all my friends have been calling me from the Secret Service and other agencies saying, why didn't she step up right away and answer it? When she was confronted at the convention earlier, she should have said to these congressmen, I will give you an open and thorough investigation, instead of blowing them off saying that she's here to support her team. She should admit to the Congress, I will answer all of your questions thoroughly, and I promise a thorough investigation. And they would have stopped hammering her like a bunch of hornets, but she didn't say that.
And I do actually want to play that because you mentioned that, and we do have some of the video that came in from Marsha Blackburn. So I want to pop that up really quickly so we can give it a listen, and it kind of tells the story of that confrontation.
Resignation or full explanation to us right now.
We have trying to get our questions in, and whoever was running the file is not a director.
We will hold you.
Nearly killed. You mean an hour out, you had a suspicious person, and at 5:51, according to the timeline of your deputy, you identified a potential threat. And then at 5:53, you told, or someone told, that the sniper, that he was there. But can you give us an explanation? Why would anyone allow the president to go on stage when you know you've got a potential threat and you've got snipers that are trained? Why? I don't think that this is the point
Well, you hung up on it. We're here. You cut off the meeting first.
Actually to thank the partners who have helped secure the Republican National Convention, and I would not want to take away from their safety.
Well, we can find a place to go right now.
Yeah. All right, we're back again. This is the
We'll leave with you then.
Thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
No, we're going with you. We're going with you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Afghanistan veteran Scott.
Go ahead.
All right, so as you can see, no real explanation there. She just says, we'll talk about it later, and then we know that she is going to testify before Congress on Monday. You can see in the video, they're kind of chasing after her and asking her, tell us what happened, trying to get a clear answer there. So hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about what happened as we do see that testimony on Monday. But back to what we're discussing here, we now know that prior to this rally, the U.S. had actually uncovered a plan by Iran to assassinate Trump. So security had already been increased, beefed up, whatever you want to call it. But the fact that this was able to happen despite concerns over that Iranian threat, does that just make it all even more difficult to believe?
Absolutely. But what's embarrassing and appalling, and it makes me angry internally, and it also, I find it professionally unreal to even see this kind of ineptness. To see somebody who can climb up on a roof. This is daylight. It's open. It's not dark. It's not camouflaged. I don't believe there was any overhead drones or helicopters. And I've been to some of these rallies myself, and that's typically there to pervade the scene of any threat. All of that was missing in this basic training security 101. There was nothing there to prevent that. I can't blame the local cops because they are local cops. They're not experienced and sophisticated in this sort of thing. And I doubt they went to the Secret Service Academy to be trained. So when you see this, my opinion, and I say this carefully, it doesn't really matter the motive of the shooter, his background, what he did, what he planned, all that. It tells you that anybody, any amateur could have climbed that roof and done that same thing because the range on it is shorter than the basic training of an infantry soldier private. That means anybody could have done this because of that hole in security. So it doesn't matter if it's sophisticated, an amateur, or a kid with a slingshot, for God's sake, or a BB gun. That's the thing that bothers me the most. I'm not so much worried about this guy's motive. I'm concerned that the security was absolutely lapsing, and that meant anybody could have climbed that roof and done that with. So there was no observation. I mean, I'm speechless when it comes to understanding how that could happen. It meant the people on the scene didn't do their security work. There's no blame on the local cops, although it's like the guy climbing on the roof. Think of it this way. The police officer that climbs on the roof sees the shooter and ducks down or falls down. Now, what would be the protocol if you were a police officer? Would it be normal to fire a round in the air to cause distraction, to make everybody duck because of the sound of a gunshot? Maybe the cop would have gotten fired for firing a round in the air. Any type of warning that would have been instantaneous would have made a difference. Because if the police officer got on his radio and tried to do it, the delay between him, his dispatch, and the connectivity at the communications center, finally to get to the earpiece of the agents on the stage, that time delay caused these shootings and the death of a man, an injury, and a near death of a president. So the communication breakdown was enormous, and the officer could have done something different. I'm not going to blame him, but had you and I been in uniform in a police, would you not have shot at him? Well, I can't shoot a guy, but I would have said a warning shot. In the Army, we would have done a warning shot to warn the guys to duck and run.
All right. Brian Boyd, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and provide some perspective there. Still a lot of questions, and hopefully we'll get at least a few answers on Monday during that testimony. Is there anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
Well, my career historically has always been a phone call, somebody asking me to start an intelligence unit. It's just the irony of my background. When I got out of college and I got out of the Green Berets and went into the reserves, I always got a phone call saying, hey, we had this problem. Can you come in and become an intelligence chief and fix it? I did it for 3 different agencies. And I even did it as a defense contractor when there was a plan for the Gulf War. I got dragged back in then when I was retired. But the point is this, it takes intelligence failures and things like this to shake up and reorganize the system. Unfortunately, that's the way the world turns. A lot of our intelligence agencies historically, going back to the OSS, were based on foresight. But since then, it's always been an intelligence failure or major operational failure that causes change. So out of these congressional hearings, there has to be change. There has to be change about the way the Secret Service is structured, the way they do their protocols, their resources, and the way they need to probably be moved into an executive position with the office of the White House instead of being buried in a new bureaucracy called Homeland Security. Before that, they were direct. They used to be in Treasury because their role as Secret Service is to arrest counterfeiters. And the difference is when there's a thing like this occurring, they have to immediately turn over the investigation to the FBI. That creates another convoluted bureaucratic mess.